Hey everybody, welcome back to Sensei Steve Says, hosted by Shiage Do Martial Arts. Today we're going to be talking about turning your katas into a workout using ankle weights and wrist weights. So ankle weights and wrist weights come in a large number of sizes and shapes and weights and etc. But what you can use them to take the motions that we're already doing when we're doing our kata to kind of build more muscle and get more of an effect out of the exercise we're already doing. Now, there's a couple of precautions here. If you are doing a kata and you are doing it with any kind of speed, you do not want a heavy weight, okay? This is going to be directly related to you and your skill and your body mass and your strength to weight ratio and all that kind of stuff. I weigh about 200 pounds. I can lift a significant amount, but when I'm doing things at full speed and full power, the wrist weights and the ankle weights that I aim for are 2.5 pounds to 5 pounds. If I do 5 pounds on my arms or my legs, I have to cut the speed in half. And the reason for that is not because you can't necessarily lift the weight. That's ridiculous. The trick is to not do tendon damage, okay? If you do a back fist with a heavy weight as fast as you can, the chances of you doing tendon damage goes up and up and up. And the more fatigued you get, the more often you're doing it, and the faster you're doing it, those chances is skyrocket. So in order to keep yourself healthy and not do lasting damage, you want to keep it at a lower weight and keep a higher rep, okay? So, what we're going to do is we're going to walk through kata together. We're going to do two of them. We're going to do Seisan kata and we're going to do Seiyunshin kata. And I'm just going to show you how I handle this. And I'm going to give you two different ways of going through these. So, what I'm doing right now is just putting on wrist weights. I like having them not super loose, but just a little bit loose. Okay, that causes me to focus on my hand placement and my wrist placement. If you're wearing a watch, make sure that the weight isn't going to break your watch. I've already done this a few times, so I know that my watch is not going to be an issue. But you want to make sure they're as snug as you need them to be so that they're not flying off. Okay, now when we do a kata with this, the important thing is to focus on the form of the kata that you're doing. Okay, so if you're doing a side block, it needs to be a side block. You don't let the weight change the technique itself, right? And if it is changing the technique, you need to back it down to a lower weight. If you are building muscle memory doing the technique incorrectly, that's not going to help you out, okay? You need that muscle memory to be proper, and also the proper technique is designed to minimize injury. So if you are doing it wrong, you are leaving that, that optimized way of injury avoidance on the table. You don't necessarily want that, okay? So I've got ankle weights on, we got wrist weights on. We're just going to walk through this kata, and then I'm going to show you another option for doing stuff like this, okay? So, Seisan kata, yes me, Kitsuke, right, Seisan. So right away, I want to be keeping some tension in my muscles. So I'm coming across, I want to make sure that these punches and stuff have tension and that they're coming from the right spot and stopping in the right spot. If I'm getting dragged by my punches, then I need to lower the weight a little bit. If I can't even feel it, I can probably bump it up just a little bit. Now, when you're doing speed techniques, you want that speed to still be there when you're doing your kata, right? So the side block punch, right? I want that to be quick. Quick, quick. Now when you get to more technical moves, right, things that are more technically difficult, you might want to hold yourself into where you need to be, right? Slide up. I want this head block to come where it needs to be. Nose block comes where it needs to be. I might slow down the transitions between the techniques so that I can keep the techniques faster when I'm doing this. So it might be fast, fast, but I slow down in between so that I can really think about what am I doing and to build that resistance of holding it there, right? And holding my chambers with a weight on them adds a little bit of difficulty. I'm going to try to make sure that my hand techniques stay where they're supposed to be, right? So that I'm not just going with the weight the whole time. Now, these are wrist weights, right? So that's one way of doing it. So if I do this kata, another option, sometimes like wrist weights have a limit or a reasonable limit of how heavy you can get them. If they sell them in 2.5s or 5s, right, and you put that on, you might be able to fit a second one on your forearm, but you're not going to be able to fit a third. So if you get to the point where you need heavier weights, right, where you keep getting stronger, then what you're going to be relegated to is dumbbells. Okay, now these are 5-pound dumbbells. Again, these are the upper range of where my stuff goes for full speed, full power techniques. But when I'm doing this with dumbbells, I have to be even more careful that my techniques are proper, right? Because now I don't get that hand position. I have to keep hold of this dumbbell, right? So when I do my double head block here, I turn around double shudos, right? I don't get that a roots block with my wrist anymore, right? Because I'm going to throw this thing. So I have to be very confident in where my wrist goes when I'm doing the technique, okay? And you'll notice, right? Just like in a roots block, grab my wrist is sideways and pulling it back. It comes up, roots block, grab, and pull. So I'm going to keep my wrist in the proper orientation, even though I can't do what I need to with my hands. Another option is what I'll come back in a second. It takes me a minute to get into these. So we'll show you what we do for katas like Seiyun Shin that focus more on stances. So the other option, especially for katas like Seiyun Shin, is the use of a weight vest. Most weight vests come anywhere from 10 to, you can get them all the way up to 120 pounds I've seen. You can buy one of those to put it on. For a weight vest, you're not so worried about your tendons, okay? You need to be able to move in it, which is key, you know, because of if you're like trying to pick up your knee or something to do a chamber or to get into a cat stance, you need to have a good bit of mobility, especially around your abdomen, to be able to get into that. But your torso doesn't move that quickly, so the chances of doing tendon damage is much lower. Now, with that being said, you can also use any kind of weight. I've got ring weights. Also, in running a karate school, fun fact, every karate uniform you buy comes with a white belt. Okay, if you don't need a white belt because it's for somebody who's just growing, you end up with a ton of extra white belts. So I use them for everything. They make really good tie downs. So what I've done is just tie 2 ring weights. These happen to be 10-pounders. That's what I had handy. But you could do it with any amount of weight. You could tie dumbbells up to your chest if you get a little creative. The other reason I like belts is because they've got a nice wide, you know, they're wide, so it spreads out the force. So if I did grab my 25-pounders and stack 50 pounds on me, the chances of doing damage to myself just by like crushing into my shoulder plates is much less. You could do it by putting weight in a backpack. I recommend having a backpack with a stomach strap. If you got something like that, you could do it that way. And even if you can't buy weights, especially like right now with COVID going on, you can make your own. Water weighs 8 pounds a gallon. So if you take a couple gallon jugs and you could do it that way. You could also do rice. Rice has a lot of weight for not a lot of money. You can buy a 10-pound bag of rice for $3, $5, you know, get the cheap stuff, you know, the store brand, whatever. But you buy it by the pound anyway. So if you buy a 10-pound bag, it weighs 10 pounds, you know, and you can get it, you know, in a smallish bag, throw those in a backpack, tuck one into your gi, you know, maybe on the front or the back, and that's going to give you your mobility as well as your weight without being too debilitating. Now, the reason that you would put weight in your torso is to work on your stances, all right, to build your leg muscles. Even just having weight on you and holding a horse stance or doing like sumo squats where you're coming down and pulsing and then coming back up, holding that heavy weight is going to take that exercise and multiply it many times depending on how much weight you've got on. So doing a kata like Sanshin or Seimshin, where its focus is low, deep, strong stances and strong footwork, you know, your ankle weights might not make as much sense because you're not doing any kicks. But torso weights, the weights you down, are going to make those legs a lot stronger. Okay? So we're going to do some Seimshin. I'm just going to show you a couple things that I like to think about while I'm doing kata like that. So, izumi, kotsuke, right, Seimshin. So right away, if I'm wearing weights, right, I want to make sure I get into a good stance. I'm going to hold myself into it, right, and I'm really going to focus through my hand techniques, right, so that I focus on staying in this horse stance, and I'm doing kind of like holdouts for every part, right? So this section that normally would take me maybe, you know, 5 or 10 seconds to do, I'm going to slow it down and let it take, you know, 15, 20 to 30 seconds so that I get that workout in my legs while I'm doing this kata. Right, and I'm going to make sure I set into all my stances so that I can get that little extra oomph into it, right? If my weights are getting in the way of good technique, you know, do the technique as close as you can, but that's realistically, that's training for a good fight too. Fights are sloppy, right? They're not, you don't get to use good technique in a fight. You don't get to use, you don't get to plan what they're going to do. You might have an idea of what they're going to do. You might be able to adapt, and the closer you can get to your perfect form, the better your stuff's going to work. But it's going to be sloppy. They're going to move in unforeseen and directions that you haven't prepared for, right? So that gives you a little bit of extra practice in just dealing with your own body when you don't necessarily have control. Right, and I've got wrist weights on, so I'm still going to be focusing on good wrist technique, good hand technique, and it's super important, especially in Seimshin kata. This is the one I tend to see this in a lot. If I'm doing my big down blocks, I don't want that elbow to lock, right? Because if I'm locking and I've got weights on it especially, you're already prone to hyperextension when you're doing this big down block. But if I do this big down block and I have weights on it, that little bit of hyperextension can do way more damage. Okay, so be careful with that. Right, if you feel, it'll feel like you got to cut your technique short a little bit because the weight's going to try to carry you a little bit further. Now the last thing I want to talk about, just outside of a kata, if you're doing weighted work like this, if you ever watch one of the masters do their kata, they get that kind of like little pulse thing going on, right? Where their hand will come up and it'll pulse a couple times, right? And it locks and it's pulsing a little bit. If you think about it, if mechanically, if you think about it, it's like a machine hitting an end stop, right? When the machine is new, it hits that end stop and stops. When the machine is old and well worn, it hits that end stop and bounces a little bit. It's like, for those of you old enough to drive, it's like throwing your car in park when you're moving about a mile an hour. You'll sit there and back forward and back on the gear on the parking pin. So you get a little bit of forward and a little bit of back, and it'll take a second for your car to stop, right? That's the same effective purpose of this little jingle here. If you think about how your side block is supposed to work, your blocks are supposed to work, it's a strike, right? I'm striking the arm, I'm launching it, I'm putting as much force as I can into that, so it goes, I stop here and their arm goes, you know, whacks way off into the distance over there. That's what I want, right? Or they don't let it move and I break it instead, right? So if I'm doing this, I want that little bit of we call it shiage. Shiage means like 100% full effort, hence, or finishing effort, or hence Shiage Do. Weird, I know, but it's not a coincidence. But that little bit of pop, right, is what you want to show in your techniques. And if you've got weights, it makes it a little bit easier to feel what that is supposed to be like, right? Because your weights are going to do that little jiggle by themselves because they don't have a good end stop, right? So if I'm doing my head block, if I'm doing my punches, you'll feel it jiggle just a little bit, right, as it comes out. And I'm not saying, you know, to be like the old guy with rickets where he goes out here. It should be subtle, but strong, right? And then all that is just taking into account not having, or actually having somebody there and forcing all that energy into them. And then where does your arm stop after that? So that's why there's that little shake. And this is a great way to train that. With that, that's all I've got for our regular class today. Thanks for tuning in. A couple quick announcements. If you guys are a YouTube subscriber, make sure you guys check out our Patreon page. We can do a couple cool things with Patreon. So if you're a supporter there, you can jump in with our Zoom classes. You can jump in with all kinds of cool stuff with that. You could jump into basically distance learning classes where you get access to me and the other Shiage Do staff, which is kind of cool. So that if you just don't live near a dojo and you want to train, we can help you out. If you're one of my Shiage Do students, keep in mind the COVID Kata classes. We're going to be doing those out in the park on June 13th, the 20th, and the 27th. Make sure you sign up for those. And June is our 30 and 30 challenge is the one we're going with today. So basically it's 30 miles in 30 days. You are not limited to that number. If you do more, then good for you. But it's just to get us out and moving throughout the month. If you don't want to run in the rain, you want to run 2 miles a day after that, that's fine. If you do want to run in the rain, you want to run 20 miles after that, that's fine too. The person who comes in with the most mileage of anybody in June is going to get a limited edition t-shirt drawn by me. It's kind of cool. It's Ghost Engine, or Mizugami, but it's a different illustration. So it's actually Ryu Karate, the guiding goddess of Isshin Ryu, or the patron goddess of Isshin Ryu. But it's going to be really cool, so look forward to that. With that, that's what I got. If you guys enjoy what you see, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you keep getting our great content. With that, that's all I got. You guys are awesome. Keep on getting after it. You guys are dismissed. Us!